Welcome. I'm glad you've joined us for moments of relaxation. I'm here to help you enjoy a calm evening tonight. Before you get too comfortable, remember to support by liking and subscribing if you truly enjoy what we share. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It really makes us feel like one small family spread all around the world. Just a quick note, there will be a few ads in the first 15 minutes, but after that, the content is completely interruption-free. I hope you'll give this experience a chance, because I'm sure you'll find something different and special here. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's begin our journey together. The House on Raven Hill, Chapter 1. Arrival. The first time I saw the house on Raven Hill, it looked like something torn out of a half-forgotten dream. Its roofline cut jaggedly against the sky, black shingles missing in patches like broken teeth, and the tall, skeletal trees around it leaned in as though they were conspiring. I remember stopping my car at the bottom of the hill and staring at it through the windshield. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and pine. Even though the house looked abandoned, I knew it wasn't. Not anymore. It was mine now. I had signed the papers only a week earlier. A run-down property in the middle of nowhere. Cheap enough that it almost felt like theft. I told myself it was a fresh start. A chance to write the book I'd been postponing for years. No neighbours close by. No city noise, no distractions. Just silence and space. That was what I thought I wanted. As I carried the first of my boxes inside, the silence wrapped around me like a damp cloth. My footsteps echoed too loudly across the wooden floor. The air smelled faintly of dust and something else. Something metallic, like old coins or dried blood. I told myself it was just the pipes. Old houses always smelled strange. The living room was vast, with tall windows draped in faded curtains. Dust motes spun lazily in the shafts of late afternoon light. Against one wall sat a fireplace, bricked up long ago. On the mantel above it, someone had left a cracked porcelain doll, one eye missing, staring at me with unsettling patience. I laughed nervously and moved it to a box in the hallway. I wanted to believe the house was only a house, but as the sun lowered, shadows grew long, and the silence deepened into something else. Something watchful. The first warning. That evening, I drove into the small town 3 miles down the road. The grocery store doubled as a hardware shop and post office, run by a heavy-set man named Clark. When he asked for my address, I told him, Raven Hill. The man's smile froze. He looked at me as if I had confessed to digging up graves for fun. You bought that place? He asked slowly. Yes. Why? His eyes darted away. No reason. Just folks around here don't last long up there. He tried to laugh it off, but the way his hands shook while bagging my items told a different story. Before I left, he added in a lower voice, if you hear anything at night, don't go looking. Just stay in your room. The drive back up the hill felt colder somehow, though the evening air was still warm. His words stuck with me long after I locked the door behind me. Settling. In the first night was meant to be simple. Unpack a little, eat something easy, get some sleep. The house, however, had other plans. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of knocking. Soft, rhythmic. I sat up, heart hammering. It was coming from the ceiling, the attic. I held my breath, listening. The knocking stopped, then started again. Slower this time, as though whoever or whatever was up there wanted me to know it could wait. I told myself it was raccoons, or maybe a loose branch hitting the roof. But when I checked outside, the trees stood motionless, their branches far from the shingles. The night was perfectly still. I didn't sleep much after that. The door that shouldn't be open. The following morning, I went upstairs to explore. The hallway stretched long and narrow, lined with doors that seemed taller than they should be. At the far end was a pull-down ladder leading to the attic. It was already down. I froze. I knew I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even been upstairs yet. The ladder creaked slightly as though someone had just climbed it. A faint draft of cold air whispered down from the square of blackness above. I didn't go up. Not then. I shoved the ladder back into place and closed the hatch tight. But even after it was sealed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something up there was waiting. Patient, silent, and smiling. The neighbour. Later that day, as I was clearing weeds from the front path, I noticed a man standing by the gate. He was tall, thin, his skin weathered like old leather. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and didn't smile when I waved. "You bought this place?" he asked. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "I'm just moving in." He spat into the dirt. "Shouldn't have done that." When I asked what he meant, he only shook his head. "Things don't like to be disturbed." Then he turned and walked away without another word. Thoughtful. That night, the house felt alive. The wooden beams groaned as though settling, but the sounds were too deliberate, too heavy. I thought I heard whispering behind the walls, just faint enough that I couldn't catch the words. When I finally drifted into sleep, I dreamed of the attic. In the dream, I climbed the ladder, heart racing, and pulled myself into the darkness. At first, I saw nothing. Then, in the far corner, 2 pale hands reached out of the shadows, beckoning. I woke up drenched in sweat, the echo of knocking above my head. Chapter 2. The first night. The second night in the house was when the silence began to change. On the first evening, the quiet had been unsettling, but manageable, like stepping into a library after years of city noise. But on the second, it felt aware. I had the eerie sense that the silence wasn't the absence of sound, but the presence of something listening. I tried to ignore it. I unpacked a few boxes, set up a small desk by the window where I planned to write, and cooked myself a bland dinner. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees, the entire house seemed to shift. Shadows thickened in corners, and the wooden floors groaned as though the building were settling down for the night, except the sounds came from rooms where I wasn't. I told myself it was just an old house adjusting to a new occupant, but deep down, I knew better. 3 a.m. I don't remember falling asleep. One moment I was lying on the mattress, staring at the ceiling, and the next I was wide awake, heart pounding. The clock on my phone read 3:02 a.m. Footsteps. They were slow, heavy, and deliberate, pacing back and forth just outside my bedroom door. At first, I thought it was the neighbour, the tall man with the leathered face, maybe playing some cruel prank. But the steps were inside the house. I was sure of it. I lay frozen, straining my ears. The steps stopped. The silence pressed against me, so thick it felt like a weight on my chest. Then came a soft knock. 1, 2, 3, right on my door. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The knocking stopped, replaced by the faint sound of scratching, slow dragging scratches across the wood, like fingernails testing the surface. I wanted to scream, to leap out of bed and run, but I couldn't. My body felt pinned, every muscle locked. All I could do was lie there, staring at the dark outline of the door, waiting for it to open. But it didn't. After what felt like an eternity, the scratching stopped. The footsteps retreated down the hallway. And then, silence again. The attic ladder. Morning came, and with it, a fragile sense of safety. Sunlight spilled through the windows, chasing away the shadows that had stalked me through the night. I forced myself to laugh at my fear. Sleep paralysis, I told myself. A half dream. That was all. But when I opened my bedroom door, I saw the attic ladder hanging down again. I knew I had pushed it up the day before. I had latched it shut. Now it gaped open, the ladder extending into the hallway like a tongue, inviting me to climb. I stood at the bottom of it for a long time, staring into the square of blackness above. A cold draft brushed my face, carrying with it the faint smell of mildew and something else. Something sharp and sour. Part of me wanted to climb up, to prove there was nothing there. Another part of me, the louder part, told me not to. The memory of those footsteps was still too fresh. I shoved the ladder up and closed the hatch once more. But as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had already come down. Clark's story. That afternoon, I drove into town again. I told myself I needed more supplies, but really, I needed answers. When Clark saw me walk into his store, he frowned. Rough night. I hesitated. Did something happen in that house? Something people don't talk about. Clark glanced around, making sure no one else was listening. Then he leaned closer. You don't want to know. I do, I insisted. If I'm living there, I need to know. He sighed heavily. There was a family back in the 1960s. The Carters, husband, wife, 2 little girls. They moved in, just like you. A few months later, the wife was found wandering the road in her nightgown, covered in blood. Couldn't speak, just kept pointing back at the house. My stomach turned. And the rest of the family? Never found, Clark said. Police searched every inch. Nothing. Place has been sold a few times since, but folks never stay long. You'll see. You'll be gone by winter. He said it not as a warning, but as a fact. The whispering. That night I tried to sleep with the lights on. It didn't help. At 3 a.m. I woke again. This time, there were no footsteps, no knocking, just whispering. It seeped through the walls, low and urgent, like voices murmuring in the next room. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew they were speaking about me. I pressed my ear against the wall. The whispering grew louder, overlapping voices rising and falling like a terrible chant. My skin crawled. I stumbled back to bed, pulling the blanket over my head like a child. The voices didn't stop. They circled the room, slipping from corner to corner, never close enough to catch, but never far enough to ignore. When the whispers finally faded, dawn was breaking. I hadn't slept at all. The photograph. On the 3rd morning, I decided to face the attic. I couldn't live in constant fear of it. The ladder was down again, as if waiting for me. My hands trembled as I climbed, the wood creaking under my weight. The attic air was stale and icy cold, biting into my lungs. The space was larger than I expected, stretching into shadow. Cobwebs hung thick like curtains, and the floor was littered with old boxes and furniture covered in dusty sheets. In the far corner, half buried under a rotting trunk, I found it. A photograph. It was black and white, faded with age. A family stood in front of the very house I was standing in now. A man, a woman, and 2 young girls in matching dresses. But what froze my blood was the window above them. In the upstairs window, behind the smiling family, stood a dark figure, tall, faceless, watching. I dropped the photo, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The air in the attic seemed to thicken, pressing against me. I could feel eyes on me, though the shadows remained still. I didn't run. I fled, stumbling down the ladder, slamming the hatch shut behind me. And this time, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get the latch to catch. The attic stayed open. The dream, that night, sleep claimed me despite my fear. And again, I dreamed of the attic, only this time, the dream didn't end when I saw the hands. In the dream, I climbed fully inside. The air was heavy and the darkness felt alive. The hands belonged to a woman. Her hair was long and tangled, her face pale and hollow. She crawled towards me, her mouth opening in a scream, except no sound came out. Instead, I heard the whispers, clearer than before. "Stay with us." I woke gasping, my throat raw as if I had been screaming too. Chapter 3. The History of Raven Hill. The following morning, I left the house earlier than usual. The sleepless nights were wearing me thin, and I needed answers more than I needed food or rest. Something about the photograph I found in the attic, the smiling family with the dark figure in the window, gnawed at me. I drove straight into town, determined to dig into the house's past. The library. The town library was a squat brick building, wedged between an insurance office and an old diner. Inside, it smelled of paper, dust, and lemon polish. The librarian, a frail woman with silver hair pinned into a bun, looked up as I entered. "Help you with something?" she asked. "I'm looking for records. Old newspapers, property deeds. Specifically about the house on Raven Hill." Her face tightened instantly. She studied me for a moment before replying, "That place again. You've heard of it." "Everyone here has heard of it," she said. "Most wish they hadn't." Despite her reluctance, she guided me to the archives in the basement, a dim room with rows of steel cabinets and stacks of yellowed newspapers. She left me alone with a parting warning. "Be careful what you stir up." Newspaper clippings. Hours slipped by as I combed through brittle pages and fading ink. At first, I found small mentions, classified ads listing the property for sale at suspiciously low prices, notes about renovations that never seemed to finish, and occasional obituaries that linked back to Raven Hill. But then I found something darker. 1924. Local family found dead in Raven Hill home. The article described a couple and their son, discovered lifeless in their beds. No signs of struggle, no wounds, no explanation. Authorities ruled it a case of accidental poisoning, though the cause was never confirmed. 1949. 2 children missing from Raven Hill. The report detailed the disappearance of siblings aged 6 and 8. Their parents claimed they vanished from their bedroom overnight. No forced entry, no footprints, no clues. The case was never solved. 1963. Wife found in shock, family missing. The Carter family. The same story Clark had told me, only now I saw the details. Margaret Carter found wandering the road in a blood-soaked gown, unable to speak. Her husband and daughters never located. Margaret herself died in an asylum 10 years later, still mute. The deeper I dug, the more the pattern became clear. Every few decades, the house swallowed its occupants. Families moved in, only for some, or all, of them to vanish without explanation. The town historian. I wasn't satisfied with just clippings. I needed context. The librarian, perhaps feeling guilty for leaving me in the basement so long, mentioned an old man who might know more. Harold Bishop, the unofficial town historian. He lived above the diner in a cramped apartment that smelled of tobacco and mothballs. Harold was thin as a rail, his skin like parchment, his eyes sharp despite his age. When I mentioned Raven Hill, he chuckled bitterly. "That house has been trouble since the day it was built," he said. "Why? What happened there?" He lit a cigarette and leaned back in his chair. "The land itself is bad. Cursed, some say. Before the house there was nothing there but woods and ravens. They say the ravens gathered there in the hundreds, circling the trees like smoke. Old stories claim the land was used for rituals. Sacrifices I swallowed. And when the house was built, the first owner was a man named Jonathan Harlow. Wealthy, ambitious, thought he could tame the land. But he lost everything: his wife, his children, his mind. Folks say he started hearing voices in the walls. Then one night, he disappeared. House has never been right since I asked him about the photograph, about the shadow in the window. His expression darkened. You saw it too then. You know what it is. He took a long drag on his cigarette before answering. Not what. Who. Some call it the Watcher. It shows up in every generation, always in the house, always in the photos. People say it's the one that takes them. His voice dropped to a whisper. If you've seen it once, you'll see it again. The diner encounter. Shaken, I stopped at the diner below Harold's apartment before heading home. I ordered coffee, trying to process everything I'd learned. The waitress, a young woman with tired eyes, set the cup down in front of me. You're the one staying at Raven Hill, aren't you? She asked quietly. Yes. Why? She bit her lip. My uncle lived there in the 80s. He lasted 6 months before he came back. Changed. He said he heard voices every night. Said the walls breathed. He wouldn't talk about what happened, but he never slept in the dark again. She leaned closer. If you're smart, you'll leave before it's too late. Her words echoed Harold's, Clark's, the librarians. Everyone said the same thing. Leave. But I couldn't. Not yet. Back at the house. Driving back up Raven Hill felt different that evening. Now I carried the weight of stories, clippings, and whispers. The house was no longer just a structure. It was a graveyard of histories, a trap that had caught too many before me. As I stepped inside, the air was colder than usual, though the weather outside was mild. The shadows seemed to thicken in greeting, stretching long fingers across the walls. And then I noticed it. On the mantel above the fireplace, the place where I had moved the cracked porcelain doll on the first day, there was now something else. The photograph. The same one I'd found in the attic. Only this time, the shadow in the window was gone. And standing where the family had been smiling, there was now a fifth figure. Tall. Faceless. Watching. Chapter 4. The attic. I had avoided the attic for as long as I could. Every night, the ladder unfolded itself like an invitation, and every morning I shoved it back into place, pretending I still had control. But after finding that photograph on the mantel, changed, altered, I realized the attic wasn't just part of the house. It was the heart of it, and it was waiting for me. The climb. The fourth night I couldn't resist any longer. Sleep was impossible anyway. At exactly 3 a.m., the ladder creaked down on its own, each rung unfolding with a deliberate snap. I stood at the bottom, flashlight in hand, pulse hammering in my ears. My body screamed to run, but my legs carried me upward. The air grew colder with each step. By the time my head cleared the hatch, a breath of icy wind greeted me, thick with the smell of damp wood and something rotten beneath it. The beam of my flashlight cut through swirling dust. Shapes emerged from the darkness, shrouded furniture, broken trunks, stacks of boxes. The silence up there wasn't empty. It was charged, buzzing, as though the attic itself were holding its breath. The journals. Near the far wall, half hidden under a collapsed chair, I found a wooden crate. Inside were books, their leather covers cracked with age, their pages yellowed. They weren't books, I realized as I lifted one out. They were journals. The first was dated 1923. The handwriting was cramped and frantic. The voices are louder tonight. They come from the walls, from beneath the floorboards. They tell me to stay, to listen. Elizabeth says she doesn't hear them, but I know she lies. I see her talking to the corners when she thinks I am not looking. I turned the page with trembling fingers. Last night I dreamt of the attic. A man stood there, tall and faceless, and he beckoned me forward. When I woke, the ladder was down. The words bled together as my eyes blurred. It was too familiar, too close to what I had been experiencing. Another journal, this one from 1948. The children whisper to someone I cannot see. They call him their friend. I forbid them to play in the attic, but they sneak up anyway. They say he tells them secrets, that he promises they'll never have to leave. Tonight, I found their beds empty. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the book. I forced myself to keep going, flipping through entry after entry, spanning decades. Every family who lived here, every tenant, had written the same things. Voices, footsteps, dreams of the attic, the faceless man. The last journal in the crate was dated 1962, belonging to Margaret Carter. The writing started neat, but descended into jagged scrawls. He wants us to stay. He says we are his now. The girls laugh with him, sing with him. I try to take them away, but the doors will not open. The house will not let us leave. He tells me I must give blood if I want peace. I will not. I will not. The entry ended there. The ink smeared as though the pen had been torn from her hand. The whisper. As I sat there, the attic around me grew colder. My breath came out in white clouds, and then I heard it. A whisper. At first it was faint, like wind through cracks in the wood. Then it grew louder, circling me, threading itself between the beams. Stay with us. I dropped the journals and scrambled back. My flashlight flickered, the beam slicing across the far corner. Something moved, not furniture, not dust, a shape. Tall, thin, faceless. It didn't advance, it didn't need to. Just the sight of it rooted me in terror. The whispers rose into a chorus, dozens of voices layered together, all chanting the same words. Stay. 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 I stumbled down the ladder, nearly breaking my ankle in the rush. The hatch slammed shut above me without my touch. The locked doors. Panicked, I tried the front door. The knob rattled but wouldn't turn. The back door, the same. The windows refused to budge. It was as if the house had decided. I wasn't leaving. I pressed my forehead to the cold glass, heart racing. Outside, the woods stood silent under the moonlight. Somewhere in the branches, a raven croaked, the sound harsh and mocking. When I turned back, the photograph was waiting on the floor at my feet. The family still stood smiling, but now they were joined by a fifth figure, and a sixth, both tall, both faceless. The candle light. For the rest of the night, I lit every candle I could find and sat in the living room, clutching the journals. I thought if I surrounded myself with light, the shadows couldn't reach me. But the whispers didn't stop. They threaded through the candle flames, curling into my ears. Some were soft, coaxing. You belong here. Some were cruel. You will never leave. One voice, deeper than the rest, spoke clearly, almost gently. We waited for you. I pressed my hands to my ears until they ached, but the voices seeped through my skin, vibrating in my bones. The decision. By dawn, I made a choice. I couldn't keep pretending this was just a haunted house. The attic wasn't merely holding old memories. It was alive, hungry, drawing me in like it had drawn in everyone before me. I told myself I'd leave. I'd pack what little I had and drive away. No matter if the townsfolk laughed. No matter if I never wrote another word. But when I looked out the window, the road down from Raven Hill was gone. The trees had shifted in the night, their trunks twisted together like bars. The path that had always been there was swallowed whole by forest. And in the distance, above the treetops, a figure stood, tall, faceless, waiting. Chapter 5. The Possession. I used to think madness crept in slowly, like fog rolling over a field. But in Raven Hill, madness arrives like a storm. One night you are afraid, the next you are no longer certain which thoughts are yours and which belong to the house. The first, paralysis. It began with the dreams. At first, they were just echoes of what I'd already seen. The attic, the journals, the faceless figure in the shadows. But then they changed. One night, I awoke, or thought I awoke, to find myself frozen on the bed. I couldn't move a finger, couldn't scream. My chest heaved like a man drowning. At the foot of the bed, a shadow gathered. Not cast by anything, not shaped by a light. It was a presence darker than the darkness itself. Slowly, it stretched upward, forming into a tall, faceless figure. It moved closer, silent as falling ash, until it stood over me. Then, with deliberate weight, it pressed its hands onto my chest. The pressure was unbearable. My lungs burned, my ribs felt ready to snap. And then came the whisper, not from outside, but inside my skull. "You are mine now." When I finally jerked awake, gasping, the clock read 3 a.m. Exactly. The house tightens. After that night, everything changed. The house no longer felt like a building. It felt like a body, and I was inside its lungs. The walls seemed to breathe. I'd run my hand along the plaster and feel it pulse faintly, as though veins ran beneath. Doors I had left open would be shut. Furniture shifted by inches when I wasn't looking. The whispers grew bolder, no longer confined to the night. They followed me through the day. Sometimes they argued with one another, overlapping voices rising and falling. Sometimes they called me by name. Once, while washing my face in the bathroom sink, I looked up into the mirror and saw not my reflection, but the faceless figure standing behind me. By the time I spun around, the room was empty. Losing time. I began to lose track of hours, even days. I would wake in strange places, on the kitchen floor, in the hallway, once at the foot of the attic ladder. My hands were often dirty, nails packed with soil, though I had no memory of digging. One afternoon, I came to my senses sitting at the desk by the window, a pen in my hand. Pages of my notebook were filled with words I didn't remember writing. Over and over, scrawled in frantic strokes. "Stay with us, stay with us, stay with us." The letters dug so deep into the paper they tore through to the wood beneath. The visitor. On the 7th night, there was a knock at the door. I almost didn't answer. Who would come up here in the middle of nowhere? But curiosity, or perhaps the house itself, drove me forward. When I opened the door, the neighbour stood there. The tall, leathery man I'd seen before. His face was grim, eyes darting nervously behind me, as if he feared what might be listening. "You look worse than the others," he muttered. "The others?" I asked. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he pressed a small leather pouch into my hand. "Salt. Spread it across the doorways. Don't let it touch you." Before I could speak again, he turned and walked away into the trees, his figure swallowed by the dark. I poured the salt across the threshold as he'd said. For the first time in weeks, the whispers fell silent. But only for a few hours. By midnight, the salt line had scattered, as though something had crawled over it, dragging clawed fingers through the grains. The whispers returned. Louder than before, angry, the entity reveals itself. That night, sleep paralysis struck again. I lay pinned, eyes wide, as the faceless figure crawled from the corner of the room. This time, it didn't just press on my chest. It leaned close, its blank face inches from mine. And then, impossibly, features began to form. A mouth, wide and grinning, eyes, black and endless. It was not a stranger's face, it was mine. "Stay," it whispered in my own voice. When I finally broke free, screaming, the reflection in the window didn't vanish. It stood there, smiling back at me long after I'd buried my face in my hands. The journals change. Desperate for answers, I returned to the journals. But when I opened them, the words had changed. Where once there had been frantic handwriting from long-dead tenants, now there were fresh entries dated with the current day. He is almost ready. He resists, but the house is patient. Soon he will join us. Another page. We are inside him now. He cannot leave. He is ours. I slammed the journal shut, bile rising in my throat. But when I looked down, the words were still there, burned into my memory, not the paper. Breaking point. I stopped trying to leave. The doors would not open. The windows showed only endless forest, no matter how hard I pounded or screamed. The house had swallowed me whole. I spoke aloud just to hear my own voice, but even that was drowned out by the whispers. They were constant now, threading through my every thought, guiding my hands, steering my steps. One evening, I caught myself standing in the attic again, though I had no memory of climbing the ladder. In front of me lay the photograph. The family was still there, still smiling. Only now I recognized the father's face. It was mine. The final whisper. That night, as I lay in bed, the faceless figure appeared again. This time I didn't fight. I couldn't. It sat on my chest, heavy and immovable. Its blank face hovered inches above mine. The whispers rose to a deafening roar, and then, in the middle of the chaos, one voice cut clear. My voice. You are not leaving, because you were never meant to leave. You were always part of us. The figure leaned closer, and as its mouth opened, I felt my own lips move in sync. The last thing I remember before the darkness took me was the sound of both of us speaking together. We are home. Chapter 6. The final night. I don't know what day it is anymore. Time has unraveled here, each hour bleeding into the next like ink in water. I only know that it is night again, and the house has decided this will be the last. Preparing to escape. I told myself I would make one final attempt. Whatever the cost, whatever it took, I would leave Ravenhill behind. I gathered what little I still owned. My car keys, my wallet, the journals. I stuffed them into a bag, though deep down I knew none of it mattered. The house didn't care about money or possessions. It only cared about me. Still, I forced myself forward. I sprinkled the last of the neighbour's salt across the threshold, whispered a prayer I hadn't spoken since childhood, and gripped the doorknob. It turned. For the first time since I arrived, the front door opened. Cold night air rushed in, and for a heartbeat I believed I had won. The woods stood before me, the moon casting silver over the twisted trees. My car sat in the drive, dark and waiting. I ran. The shifting woods. The moment my feet hit the path, the ground shifted. What had been gravel and dirt warped beneath me, twisting into black mud that clung to my shoes like tar. The trees leaned closer, their branches arching into clawed hands. The path that had once led straight down the hill now curled endlessly, bending back on itself, leading me always in circles. I ran until my lungs burned, but no matter which way I turned, The house remained ahead of me. Its windows glowed faintly, like eyes watching, mocking my struggle. The whispers followed through the trees, louder now, a chorus that shook the very ground. You cannot leave. You belong here. Stay with us. The return. When I finally staggered to a stop, exhausted and mud-smeared, I found myself standing once more at the front steps. The door hung open. Waiting. The house had let me believe I had a chance, only to drag me back. I stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind me with a thunderous finality. The house unveils itself. The walls pulsed like veins, their surfaces slick with condensation. The whispers no longer came from hidden corners, but from everywhere at once, seeping through the floorboards, vibrating through the glass. And then, one by one, the candles I had lit extinguished themselves. Shadows swallowed the rooms whole. At the center of the living room, the faceless figure stood waiting. But it was no longer alone. Shapes emerged from the walls, from the floor, from the ceiling. Pale forms with hollow eyes and twisted smiles. I recognized them from the journals, from the clippings, the families who had vanished, the Carters, the children from 1949, the couple from 1924. All of them gathered in silence, their gazes fixed on me. The final struggle. I backed away, heart slamming against my ribs. No, I whispered. I won't be part of this. I won't. But the faceless figure tilted its head, and the others mirrored the gesture. As one, they stepped forward. The air thickened, pressing against me like water. My vision blurred, my body heavy. I stumbled, fell to my knees. The whispers rose into a scream, thousands of voices chanting as one. Stay with us! Stay with us! Stay with us! The faceless figure loomed over me, its blank surface shifting once more into my own face. Only this time, it was perfect. Every scar, every line, a mirror made flesh. It reached out its hand. Against every instinct, I took it. Becoming. The moment our fingers touched, the house shuddered. The walls groaned, the floor trembled. A flood of memories poured into me, not my own, but theirs. I felt the final moments of every soul the house had claimed. Their fear, their pain, their surrender. And then, silence. The whispers ceased. The house grew still. For the first time, I understood. The house was not haunted. The house was the haunting. It fed, it consumed, it absorbed, and now it had absorbed me. I stood among the others, my face hollow, my body weightless. The faceless figure no longer stood apart from me. It was me. I was home. The last entry. I don't know how much time has passed since then. Hours? Years? Time has no meaning here. But sometimes, when the house grows restless, I feel myself pulled back toward the desk. My hands find the pen, scratching words into the paper though no ink flows. I leave messages for whoever comes next. If you are reading this, you are already inside. And once inside Ravenhill, there is only one ending. The door is closed. The road is gone. You will try to leave. You will fail. And when the voices come for you, remember, they are not strangers. They are us. They are me. And soon, they will be you. The House on Blackwood Hill. Chapter 1. The Arrival. I never believed in haunted houses. Ghost stories were things you whispered around campfires, the kind of tales meant to send a chill down your spine for a moment before everyone laughed and crawled into their sleeping bags. But everything changed last autumn, when I spent 3 nights in the old house on Blackwood Hill. It was my cousin Nathan who convinced me to go. He had inherited the property from a distant relative, an uncle neither of us had ever met. The man had lived alone, a recluse, and when he died, the house passed into Nathan's hands. Most people would have sold it right away, but Nathan was fascinated. "It's perfect for an Airbnb," he told me, excitement flashing in his eyes. "Big, old, creepy. People love that kind of atmosphere. Haunted houses make money." I laughed at the time. Haunted or not, I figured it was just an old house in the middle of nowhere. But Nathan wanted help cleaning it up, and I owed him a favour. So, on a grey October afternoon, I drove up the winding, leaf-strewn road that led to Blackwood Hill. The house came into view like something out of a dream, or a nightmare. It sat hunched against the backdrop of skeletal trees, 3 stories tall, with gables and windows like watchful eyes. The wood siding was warped and weather-beaten, paint peeled away to reveal dark veins beneath. The porch sagged and the shutters rattled in the wind, though no storm had come. I parked beside Nathan's truck and stepped out. The air was colder than I expected, sharp and heavy, as though it carried more than just oxygen. For a moment, I thought I heard whispering in the trees, but when I turned, the forest was still. Nathan waved from the porch. "Took you long enough," he called. Inside, the house smelled of dust and damp wood. The air had that stale, suffocating quality of a place left untouched for years. My footsteps echoed in the cavernous entry hall, bouncing off the high ceilings and faded wallpaper. "Creepy, right?" Nathan grinned, clearly enjoying my unease. I shrugged. "Just old. Needs work." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. We started the day by exploring. The rooms were filled with relics of the past, antique furniture draped in yellowed sheets, portraits of stern-faced ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow me wherever I went, and closets full of moth-eaten clothes. In the attic, we found boxes of letters, diaries, and photographs, most of them too faded to make out. What struck me most, though, was how lived in the house still felt. There were half-burned candles on the mantel, shoes by the back door, and a cup of tea on the kitchen table, long since turned to dust. It was as though someone had left in a hurry, or perhaps never left at all. That first night, after hours of cleaning, Nathan and I sat in the living room with a couple of beers. The fireplace was cracked and unusable, so we lit a few lanterns instead. The light flickered across the walls, making the shadows seem alive. "You know," Nathan said, lowering his voice, "they say the old man who lived here went insane before he died." I rolled my eyes. Of course they do. Every creepy house has a crazy old man story. "No, seriously," he insisted. "The neighbours say he used to talk to himself, sometimes scream, and no one ever saw visitors, but at night, people swore they saw lights in the windows. Figures moving. Figures like what? Like other people." Even though he lived alone, I laughed it off. But later that night, lying in the upstairs bedroom, I couldn't sleep. The mattress smelled musty, and the house groaned with every gust of wind. The walls seemed to breathe. And then I heard it, a soft tap, tap, tap at the window. I froze. Slowly I turned my head. The window was cracked with age, moonlight spilling through. Outside, the trees swayed. But the tapping continued, rhythmic, deliberate, like fingernails on glass. I told myself it was a branch, just a branch. But the nearest tree was at least 6 feet away. I pulled the covers over my head like a child, heart hammering. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I slipped into uneasy sleep. The next morning, Nathan was already up, cooking eggs in the dust-covered kitchen. He looked far too cheerful for someone who had slept in a house that creaked and whispered all night. "You hear anything weird?" I asked cautiously. He shrugged. "Just the usual." House noises. Why? No reason, I lied. But I couldn't ignore the unease that had settled into me, like a stone in my stomach. We spent the day clearing out the basement, which was worse than the rest of the house combined. The air was damp, thick with mildew, and the stone walls were covered in strange, dark stains. At the far end, we found a locked door. Nathan grinned. Now this is interesting. He jiggled the handle, but it didn't budge. We searched the basement for a key, but found nothing. Probably just storage. Probably just storage, I said, though my voice sounded thin. That night, the tapping returned. This time, it wasn't at the window. It came from the closet. Chapter 2. The tapping in the closet. I lay in bed that second night, staring at the ceiling. My body was heavy with exhaustion, but my mind was sharp, strung tight like a wire. The room was dark, lit only by the thin glow of the moon that leaked through the crooked shutters. That was when I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't at the window this time. It was coming from the closet. My mouth went dry. Slowly, I turned my head toward the far corner of the room. The closet door was old, painted white but flaking with age, the knob tarnished. I'd checked it earlier in the day. It was empty. Nothing inside but dust and a single cracked hanger. But now, something tapped from the other side. I told myself it could be a mouse or pipes shifting. But the sound was deliberate, spaced out, like someone trying to get my attention. Tap, tap, tap. I held my breath. My hands gripped the blankets so tight my knuckles ached. Finally, I whispered, "Nathan?" My voice cracked in the silence. No answer. "Nathan, are you messing with me?" Still nothing. I forced myself to sit up, legs trembling as I swung them off the bed. My bare feet touched the icy floorboards. Every instinct screamed at me to stay under the covers, to ignore it, to pretend it wasn't happening. But I couldn't. Step by step, I crossed the room. The air grew colder as I neared the closet. The tapping stopped. I reached out, hand shaking, and grasped the knob. It turned easily. The door creaked open. Inside was nothing but darkness. The closet smelled of damp wood and old rot. My lantern sat on the dresser. I hadn't thought to grab it before coming over. Heart pounding, I leaned in, straining my eyes. Nothing. I exhaled, a laugh escaping my lips. "Get a grip," I muttered. But as I turned to close the door, a whisper brushed my ear. "Don't." I spun around, but no one was there. The room was empty. I slammed the closet door shut and didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I confronted Nathan. "Did you come into my room last night?" He blinked at me over his coffee. "What? Number? Why?" I hesitated. If I told him about the tapping, he'd just laugh. But something in my expression must have given me away, because his face grew serious. "You heard it too, didn't you?" he said quietly. My stomach dropped. "Heard what?" "The sounds. This place. It isn't just creaks and groans. There's something here." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. But Nathan wasn't joking. His hands shook slightly as he set down his mug. "Last night," he continued, "I swear I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, heavy. I thought it was you at first, but when I got up to check..." His voice trailed off. "What did you see?" I whispered. "Nothing." The hallway was empty, but I felt. He rubbed his arms as though cold, like someone was right behind me. Neither of us said much after that. We kept busy, cleaning, clearing, trying to pretend nothing was wrong. But the atmosphere in the house had changed. Every corner felt darker, heavier. The silence wasn't empty. It was full, as if holding its breath. By late afternoon, we decided to try the basement again. That locked door nagged at us like an itch we couldn't scratch. We searched the rest of the house for a key, rifling through drawers, cabinets, even behind picture frames. Nothing. Then, in the study, I found something strange. Inside a desk drawer was a small leather-bound notebook. Its cover was cracked with age, and the pages were filled with spidery handwriting. Most of it was illegible, but I caught phrases here and there. The voices grow louder. Shadows in the walls. They wait for me at night. At the back of the notebook was a rough sketch of the house. One room was circled, the basement chamber behind the locked door. Beside it, written in jagged letters, "Do not open." It holds them back. My hands trembled as I showed it to Nathan. He frowned, then forced a laugh. Probably just ramblings from when the old man was losing it. Or maybe a warning, I said. Nathan's eyes gleamed with reckless curiosity, which makes me want to open it even more. That night was worse. I slept with the lantern burning, but even its glow couldn't keep the shadows at bay. Around midnight, the tapping began again. This time, from the window. I forced myself to look. Pressed against the glass was a hand, pale, thin, with long fingers that scraped slowly down the pane. My breath hitched. I stumbled back, heart racing. But when I blinked, it was gone. I didn't sleep at all. Chapter 3. The Door Below. By the third day, both Nathan and I were running on nerves and caffeine. Neither of us admitted we were terrified, but it showed. Dark circles under our eyes, jumpy movements, snapping at each other over nothing. We decided we needed answers. Armed with crowbars, we returned to the basement. The locked door loomed at the far end, its wood swollen with age, iron hinges rusted but solid. Nathan went first, wedging his crowbar against the frame. "Ready?" he asked. "No," I muttered. With a grunt, he pried. The wood groaned in protest. I added my strength, and together we forced the door open. The smell hit us first. A wave of rot and decay, thick and suffocating, poured from the darkness beyond. I gagged, pulling my shirt over my nose. The room inside was small, stone-walled and damp. Chains hung from the ceiling, clinking softly. The floor was covered in symbols scratched into the stone. Circles, runes, markings I didn't recognize. In the center sat a wooden chair, and on it, a bundle of rags. At least I thought it was rags. Until it moved. I stumbled back with a cry. The rags shifted, sagged, then lifted slightly, as though something beneath them was trying to rise. Nathan stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "It's nothing. Just cloth. Probably animals got in." But as he spoke, a sound filled the chamber. A low, guttural whisper. Words in a language I didn't understand. The symbols on the floor seemed to shimmer in the lantern light. "Nathan," I hissed, grabbing his arm. "We need to close it." Now, he didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the chair, wide and glassy. The whisper grew louder. Then the rags fell away, and something inside began to crawl out. Chapter 4. The thing in the chair. The rags collapsed onto the stone floor, yet something remained sitting in that chair. At first, I thought it was a trick of the shadows, the way the lantern light bent and flickered across the damp walls. But no, there was a figure there. It wasn't whole. It looked like a person who had been half-formed, as if whoever or whatever made it had given up halfway. The skin was grey and thin, stretched tight over jutting bones. Its eyes, or where eyes should have been, were deep hollows, black as pits. A mouth split its face, wide, lipless, full of teeth far too many for a human jaw. It leaned forward, the chains above rattled, though none touched it. The whispering deepened, vibrating in my chest, a sound I felt more than heard. Nathan froze, transfixed. His crowbar clattered to the floor. "Don't look at it," I shouted, shoving him back toward the doorway. The thing twitched, jerking like a puppet. Then, with a sharp snap, its head turned fully toward us. The hollow sockets locked on mine. I can't explain what happened in that moment. My mind flooded with images. Flashes of people screaming, a forest of black trees under a blood-red sky, a house burning from the inside out. I heard children crying, bones breaking, something crawling under my skin. I tore my gaze away and grabbed Nathan by the arm. "We need to go." We stumbled out of the chamber, slamming the door shut. Nathan threw his weight against it, panting. "What the hell was that?" he gasped. "I don't know." But we should never have opened it. The whispers continued, muffled but insistent, pressing through the wood like something alive. For hours, we sat upstairs in silence, listening to the faint sound rising from below. Neither of us spoke about sleep that night. We just sat in the living room, lanterns burning, jumpy at every creak. Around 3 a.m, the lights flickered. Not the lanterns, the electricity. We hadn't turned on the power. In fact, the house wasn't even connected anymore. But one by one, the overhead lights buzzed to life, casting the entire living room in a sickly yellow glow. Nathan and I stared up, horrified. The television in the corner, an ancient set with a cracked screen, switched on by itself. Static hissed, filling the silence. And then, just for a moment, through the static, I saw a face. The same hollow-eyed, lipless grin. I yanked the plug from the wall. The static died, but the air felt charged, heavy with unseen eyes. That was when Nathan said it, voice barely above a whisper. "We need to leave this house." For the first time, I agreed. Chapter 5. The flight from Blackwood Hill morning came grey and bleak. Nathan and I packed quickly, neither of us willing to linger. We barely spoke, just threw clothes and tools into bags, avoiding the basement door as though looking at it too long might summon something. As we loaded our gear into the truck, I noticed something strange. The forest surrounding the house seemed closer. The trees leaned in, branches reaching like arms. The path we'd driven up 2 days ago looked narrower, darker. "Let's go," Nathan urged. He started the engine. The truck roared to life, tires crunching over gravel as we pulled down the road. But as we rounded the first bend, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The house was still there, though we should have left it far behind. I blinked, shook my head, told myself I was overtired. But the further we drove, the more wrong things became. The road twisted back on itself, leading us in circles. No matter how far we went, the house loomed in the distance, crouched like a predator waiting for its prey. Nathan slammed his fist against the steering wheel. "This doesn't make sense." We drove for hours. The gas gauge dropped lower and lower, but the road never ended. The same gnarled trees, the same cracked asphalt, the same oppressive sky. Finally, the truck sputtered and died. We sat in silence, stranded, the house still visible through the trees. "That thing, it doesn't want us to leave," I whispered. Nathan buried his face in his hands. "Then what do we do?" I didn't have an answer. As the sun set, the air grew colder. We had no choice but to return to the house, the only shelter left. My stomach turned as we approached the sagging porch again, the front door yawning open as though it had been waiting for us. Inside, the lanterns we had left were still burning, though we had extinguished them. The flames danced unnaturally, too tall, too bright. And on the wall above the fireplace, something new had appeared. words scrawled in black ash. "You can never leave." Nathan's breath hitched. He stepped back, shaking his head. No, this can't be happening. But it was. We were trapped. And the thing in the basement knew it. That night, as we huddled in the living room, the whispers returned. Not faint this time, but clear, seeping through the walls, rising from the floorboards. They spoke in unison, hundreds of voices, overlapping in a grotesque chorus. Somewhere below, chains rattled. And then came the footsteps. Slow, heavy, climbing the basement stairs. Chapter 6. The Steps on the Stairs. The sound of footsteps rising from the basement froze us both where we sat. They weren't hurried or frantic. They were deliberate, each one slow and heavy, pressing into the boards as though something immense was climbing toward us. Nathan gripped the crowbar he'd carried since opening the basement door. His knuckles were white, sweat glistening across his forehead. "Tell me you hear that too," he whispered. I nodded, throat too tight to speak. The steps paused halfway up. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. My mind filled in the gap, imagining a figure standing there in the dark, listening. And then 3 more steps. Closer. The lantern flame sputtered. The shadows thickened, stretching long across the walls. I felt the weight of eyes on me, though the staircase remained hidden around the corner. Finally, Nathan snapped. He leapt to his feet and shouted, "Stay back!" The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no movement. My heart pounded so loud it filled my ears. Then, bang! The basement door slammed shut with such force the entire house shuddered. We bolted, racing up the stairs to the second floor, as though putting distance between us and that door might keep us safe. I knew better, though. The thing in the basement wasn't bound by doors anymore. We barricaded ourselves in one of the bedrooms, pushing a dresser against the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking, while Nathan paced the floor like a caged animal. "This isn't real," he muttered over and over. "It's just in our heads." Stress, lack of sleep. But when the dresser rattled, sliding an inch across the floor as though shoved from the other side, we both knew it was real. The whispers seeped through the cracks in the walls again, louder now. Some were in that strange language, guttural and harsh. Others were in English. "Let us in. You don't belong here. Your blood for the door." I covered my ears, rocking, trying not to hear. Nathan slammed his fists against the wall. "Shut up, shut up!" The voices laughed. Then silence. We waited, breathless, but nothing else came. Eventually, exhaustion claimed us. We fell into a shallow, haunted sleep, the dresser still pressed against the door. When I woke, the dresser had been moved aside. Neither of us had touched it. Chapter 7. The Portrait Room. The next morning, the house felt different. It was brighter, warmer, almost inviting. Sunlight poured through the cracked windows, catching dust motes that danced lazily in the air. The oppressive weight seemed to have lifted. Nathan was the first to speak. "Maybe it's over." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But deep down, I knew better. The house wasn't finished with us. We decided to explore again, looking for answers, or maybe just trying to convince ourselves the nightmare had passed. On the second floor, at the end of a narrow hallway, we found a room we hadn't entered before. The door was swollen shut, but with enough force, Nathan managed to shove it open. Inside, the walls were covered with portraits, dozens of them. Men, women, children, all painted in oils, their eyes following us with eerie precision. Some were cracked and faded, others still vibrant as though freshly painted. Each frame was ornate, carved with strange symbols that twisted and writhed if I stared too long. In the centre of the room stood a single easel. On it rested an unfinished canvas. It was a painting of me. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. The details were perfect. My face, my clothes, even the tired hollows beneath my eyes. But the background wasn't the house. It was the basement chamber, the runes glowing around me. Nathan stepped closer, his face pale. That wasn't here before. The paint was still wet. I scanned the other portraits, dread pooling in my gut. One by one, I recognized them, not the people themselves, but the similarity. The eyes, the expressions. They looked like they had all once been alive, and now they were trapped here, on canvas. Suddenly, one of the children in the paintings blinked. I screamed. Nathan grabbed my arm, dragging me from the room, slamming the door shut behind us. We stood in the hallway, panting. "They're alive," I whispered. "The paintings. They're alive." Nathan shook his head violently. No, that's impossible. But we both knew there was no such thing as impossible in this house. From behind the door, faint scratching began. Dozens of fingernails clawing at the wood. We backed away slowly, hearts hammering, until we were once again in the relative safety of the living room. Nathan collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "We're not getting out of here, are we?" I didn't answer, because I already knew the truth. The house wasn't just haunted, it was hungry, and we were its next meal. Chapter 8. The return to the basement. We avoided the basement for as long as we could, but the house had other plans. That evening the whispers came back, louder, clearer, closer. They didn't just seep through the walls now, they echoed through every room, every hallway. Wherever we went, they followed. "Come down. Finish it." You opened the door. You must complete it. At first, Nathan tried to drown them out with noise. He turned on the old record player in the study, letting some warped violin piece screech through the halls. But the voices only grew louder, rising above the music like a chorus. By midnight, the whispers became unbearable. My head throbbed, my vision swam. Every shadow seemed alive, every corner full of eyes. Finally, Nathan snapped. "I'm going back down there," he said, gripping the crowbar like a sword. "If we want to end this, it has to be in that room." I wanted to argue, to beg him not to, but deep down I knew he was right. The house would never let us rest until we faced what we'd unleashed. So together, lantern in hand, we descended the basement stairs. The air grew heavier with each step, thick and wet, like wading through invisible water. The whispers quieted, but not in relief. They were waiting. The door at the end of the basement hung open, though we had left it shut. Faint light spilled out, glowing red like embers. Inside, the chamber had changed. The runes carved into the stone floor pulsed, glowing faintly. The chains rattled though no breeze stirred. And in the centre, the chair no longer sat empty. The half-formed figure was gone. In its place stood something taller, stronger. It was fully upright now, its body elongated, its limbs too long, its skin a shifting grey that rippled like smoke. Its hollow eyes locked on us the moment we entered. Nathan raised the crowbar. "What do you want?" he shouted. The creature tilted its head, lips peeling back in a smile. When it spoke, its voice was not one but many, layered and echoing. "You." The runes flared and the chamber shook. I stumbled back, lantern swinging wildly, casting shadows that twisted into shapes, hands reaching, faces screaming, mouths opening in silent agony. Nathan charged forward with a yell, swinging the crowbar. but before it could connect, the creature raised one long arm. Nathan froze mid-swing, body rigid, crowbar suspended in the air as if gripped by invisible chains. "Let him go!" I screamed. The creature's gaze shifted to me. The images returned, flashes of death, fire, endless corridors, screams that would never end. My knees buckled, and I dropped the lantern. It shattered on the stones, flames sputtering across the floor. For a moment, the fire cut through the runes, dimming their glow. The creature recoiled with a guttural hiss. "Run!" Nathan shouted, breaking free. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing his arm, and together we fled the chamber, slamming the door behind us. The house roared in fury. The walls shook, dust raining from the ceiling. The whispers turned to screams, filling every corner. We collapsed in the hallway upstairs, gasping. Nathan's face was pale, his eyes wide with the terror I'd never seen in him before. "That thing," he whispered. "It's not just in the house. The house is it." And I knew he was right. Chapter 9. The Night of Chains. Sleep was impossible. We sat in the living room, backs to the wall, crowbar between us, waiting for whatever came next. The house was alive now, fully awake. Doors slammed on their own, windows rattled, floorboards creaked beneath invisible steps. The air buzzed with energy, every breath like inhaling static. Around midnight, we heard the chains. At first, faint clinks from below, then louder, heavier, dragging across the floorboards. They spread through the house, as though hundreds of chains were being pulled room to room. Nathan gripped the crowbar tighter. "It's coming!" I held my breath as the sound drew closer. Through the hallway, up the stairs, across the ceiling above us. The chains wrapped around the house, rattling and groaning, until it felt like the entire building was bound. Then the whispers returned, but this time they weren't coaxing. They were chanting, "Blood for the door. Blood for the door." The fireplace roared to life, though no match had been struck, flames leaping high, casting the room in hellish light. Within the flames, faces appeared, screaming, writhing, clawing to escape. And then, the basement door creaked open. We both turned toward it, dread sinking like lead in our stomachs. From the darkness beyond, a figure emerged. At first, it looked human. A man, stooped, wearing tattered clothes. But as he stepped into the firelight, I realized it was the old man, the recluse who had once lived here. His eyes were hollow sockets. His skin sagged and split, revealing glimpses of bone. Chains trailed from his wrists, clinking as he walked. Nathan whispered, That's my uncle." The old man raised his head, and in a voice that was not his own, he spoke. "You opened the door. You broke the seal. Now you belong to us." The chains shot forward like serpents, wrapping around the room, coiling toward us. We scrambled to our feet, dodging as the metal cracked against the floor, tearing splinters from the boards. One looped around my ankle. I screamed as it burned cold against my skin, dragging me toward the open basement. Nathan swung the crowbar, shattering the link, freeing me. We ran, chains snapping at our heels, the old man's hollow eyes glowing brighter with every step. But there was nowhere left to go. The front door was gone. In its place, only a solid wall of rotting wood. The house had sealed us inside, and the chains were closing in. Chapter 10. The Last Night. The chains slithered across the floor like living things, wrapping around furniture, tightening against the walls. The old man, Nathan's uncle, stood in the glow of the fireplace, his body a puppet of something far older, far hungrier. "You cannot leave," he said again, his voice a layered echo. "The door was sealed with blood." It must be opened with blood. Nathan pulled me back toward the stairs. Upstairs, we can hide. But even as we moved, the house shifted. The staircase groaned, stretching upward into blackness, each step lengthening, twisting into impossible angles. The ceiling rose higher, swallowing the second floor. The house was warping, changing. I stopped, breathless. It doesn't want us to hide. It wants us to run. The chains lashed out. One struck the wall beside my head, splintering wood. Another coiled around a chair, dragging it into the basement doorway where it vanished into darkness. Nathan swung the crowbar wildly, shouting, but the chains only multiplied. "We can't fight it," I screamed. For the first time since we'd arrived, Nathan's bravado cracked. His eyes shone with terror. "Then what do we do?" Before I could answer, the portraits began to scream. Every canvas in the house wailed in unison, their painted mouths stretching wide. The sound was deafening, rattling the glass, shaking dust from the rafters. The unfinished painting of me glowed, my likeness warping, eyes turning black, mouth splitting open in a grotesque grin. I clutched my ears, falling to my knees. It's feeding on us, I realised, on our fear. That's how it survives. The old man lurched forward, chains dragging behind him. His face cracked into a smile, revealing teeth that weren't teeth at all, but shards of bone. Nathan shoved me aside, raising the crowbar. "Stay back," he shouted. The chains struck, wrapping around his arms, yanking him off his feet. He screamed as they pulled him toward the basement door. I lunged, grabbing his hand. "Nathan!" His grip was slick with blood. The chains tightened, slicing into his flesh. His eyes locked on mine, wide with desperation. "Don't let go," he begged. I pulled with everything I had, but the strength of the house was greater. Inch by inch, it dragged him backward, his body scraping across the floorboards. And then I remembered the journal we'd found in the study, the scribbled warning, "Do not open." It holds them back. The seal wasn't meant to trap us. It was meant to contain them. If Nathan was pulled through, the door would be closed again. I realised the truth in a single horrific flash. The house didn't need both of us. It only needed one. Nathan saw it in my eyes. His face twisted with fear, then resignation. "Do it," he whispered. "No," I cried. "Do it," he screamed. "End it." The chains yanked harder. Nathan slipped further from my grasp. I had one chance, one terrible choice. I let go. Nathan's scream echoed through the house as the chains dragged him into the basement, the door slamming shut with thunderous finality. The whispers stopped. The chains vanished. The house grew still. Silence. I collapsed, sobbing, the crowbar clattering from my hands. The fireplace flickered, then died. The portraits fell quiet, their painted eyes dull once more. When I finally staggered to my feet, the front door was there again, standing wide open. Beyond it lay the forest, calm and silent in the early dawn. I stumbled out, barely able to breathe, never once looking back. Epilogue. It's been months since that night. I don't know how I made it home. I remember walking until I reached the main road, then collapsing until a passerby found me. I told the police everything, the house, the voices, the chains. They searched Blackwood Hill. They found nothing. No house, no basement, no Nathan. Just forest. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined it all, if my mind fractured under the weight of exhaustion and fear. But then, late at night, I hear it. A faint sound outside my window. Tap, tap, tap. And I know the house is still out there, waiting.